Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Kindom in Cambodia podcast, where I talk about all the things going on in my life in Cambodia. Right now, of course, I am not in Cambodia. I'm sitting in my beanbag chair in my room in Colorado, just doing all the fundraising and all of that. We had a crazy week. Huge blizzard came through on Wednesday. Ridiculous, closed everything down, a bunch of people stranded. There's a lot of abandoned cars and such on the road on Thursday, which made the drive to work pretty entertaining and a little nerve-wracking, but all in all is well. This podcast was actually supposed to come out about 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, I hit the wrong button and deleted everything, so it's taking me a while to get back into it and to re-record and do it again. But it was bound to happen at some point. So here we are back at it. This episode is on my love of music, and specifically how I hope to use my love of music in the future as I'm in Cambodia and just in life in general. This, if you want to sort of read along, this corresponds to the blog I wrote called The Music Inside Me. It came out on October 31st, 2018. And this is kind of based off of that. It's something that I've become incredibly passionate about over the last couple of months. And so, if you don't know, I am a musician. Have been pretty much my whole life. My mom has pictures somewhere of me as a little kid with socks on my hands conducting to Fantasia, the Disney movie, which I still hold as probably one of the best Disney movies ever. But I'm sitting there conducting Fantasia in this photograph when I was, 4 or 5 years old. And so it's just been something that has just been huge in my life. I knew that from a pretty young age, probably, I knew I was reasonably good at music in 6th or 7th grade. And by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I knew that I wanted my career to be something in music. Ever since then, and that's been my passion, I went to school for music education at the University of Northern Colorado. I got my degree, and after I did the world race, got a job teaching music in Pueblo. And it's just something that is ingrained in who I am is music. And my two greatest passions in life is for teaching and music. I'm not really sure when the teaching passion kind of became a thing. Because it wasn't, while in music there was like a glaring moment where I knew that I wanted to be involved with music in some way for the rest of my life. But in teaching, I never really had that moment. I don't think it was kind of more gradual into, I love teaching. And when most people hear music, most of the time they hear the lyrics and they listen to what's being said, they listen to the melody, they listen to the beat, maybe they hear the harmonies, and they might think, wow, that's really catchy, that's got a really cool beat, I like how the bass drops. Or they'll, on the opposite end, they'll be like, this sounds like something really awful. We have a joke at work for a song that comes over that it sounds like a bunch of dying cats. I have no idea what song it is. I honestly don't really care because it's really horrible. But most people hear the music and they can sort of tell what they like about it and what they don't. I listen to it differently. I don't necessarily listen to those things, or not just those things, but how do the instruments being played interact with each other? How does the musical line progress? What's the chord progression of a song? What instruments are being used? And because of this, I don't often listen to music for fun, because I end up picking it apart and analyzing it and thinking like, ooh, this would have been good, or I really like how they used a mandolin here, or whatever. and this would be really awesome if my job was sound engineer, and that was my job, and it was really awesome when I was a music teacher. But just for everyday life and listening to music, it's not super entertaining, and just general, just doing it. I do love listening to music, obviously, and I will set aside time to listen and really pick apart something and see how does this piece of music actually work. And I find that a lot of fun, which other people are like, that's incredibly boring. How could you do that? But that's just who I am. That's part of me. When I returned home, after deciding to go into the mission field and being called there, I felt kind of lost, I guess. I thought teaching and music were two things that need to be together. You can't pull them apart. I'm meant to teach music, and when I do music, it's meant to be in a teaching fashion. You know, if you have two passions, why not do them together? And they should stay together. Thankfully, that's not the case. And as soon as I found myself playing bass on the worship team at church at Parker Hills Bible Fellowship, and I started to do that because of who has now become a good friend in Jonathan. Shout out to you, Jonathan, if you're listening. And usually there's a couple of brass players in the church, and we'll do the call to worship, so everybody knows that the service is starting. And so we were practicing one morning right before the service, as we usually do, just going and practicing it twice and going and playing. And as Jonathan walked out of the room, he was singing that Sunday, I think, for it, or leading the singing. And as he walks out, he mentions to the piano player, "Oh yeah, and by the way, Nathan can probably play bass. See you, bye." And that's how I ended up learning bass, being thrown under the bus by Jonathan. But I really, really enjoy it. It is a bunch of fun, and it gives me a music fix twice a week, really, because we have practice in the middle of the week. And I'm really, really thankful for it. And while I was worried about not having a good way to play music, and I don't play tuba as much anymore as I used to, this has really been very good for me to have that musical artistic outlet twice a week. And I learned when I went to Cambodia on my vision trip, I can't go for much more than a week and a half, probably, without playing some sort of instrument. I was there, it was midway through the second week there. I was starting to get kind of fidgety and going through withdrawal, and it was weird. Almost withdrawal, not totally withdrawal. And it was really weird, and it proved to me how important music is to me, and how I hope that never goes away. I love music, and I don't ever want it to go away. But a lot of things that we do on the worship team are really great. A lot of the songs that we play really connect with me, and hopefully they connect with everybody else that we're playing it for and leading in worship. But it's just really important to have that in my life. And as I started to play on the worship team, two things kind of popped into my head, or slowly crept their way into my head, really. And the first one is, are all the songs that we're singing here, and by the way, the answer to this was yes, but are all the songs that we're singing here pointing to the gospel, and are they preaching the gospel? And the second question was, how many other cultures create their own worship music, not stealing a song from somebody else and then just translating it or anything like that, but do they actually produce their own worship music? So is there a Russian worship band out there, you know? So this this idea of culturally appropriate worship has really started to gnaw away in the back of my mind. Ever since I went to training in the summer, and I actually got a recommendation on a couple of books that were sitting out there on the table when we were talking about worship in an appropriate context, for culturally appropriate context. And I've been reading through those, and they're amazing and awesome. It's how do other cultures worship God, and how do we make sure that their worship is culturally appropriate. For example, you wouldn't go into a worship service in a Amish community in rural Pennsylvania and have a hip-hop or rap worship set. You just wouldn't do it. It would, A, you'd probably be kicked out, and B, it's nowhere even remotely close to appropriate. It won't connect with the people that you're with, that you're worshiping with. And in the same breath, you probably wouldn't go into a church in Compton, LA, and sing a bunch of hymns, from the 1800s. So how we worship and what songs we use is incredibly important. And I would put it forward that worship doesn't take a style of music, right? Like it doesn't matter what style we worship in, whether it's rap or bluegrass or through hymns or through heavy metal, as long as what we are singing is preaching the gospel, that's the main thing. And we need to avoid this temptation to push our ideas of what is the correct quote-unquote way to worship. Because the answer to that is it focused on God? Is it focused on the gospel? A really good YouTube video that fed into this and built more onto it, onto the gospel-centeredness of this, was by a rapper named Shylin. If you want to find it on YouTube, just do Shylin Doxology intro, and it should pop up there, no problem. Or if you go to my blog, it's embedded into the blog. And it's something that I've never been able to adequately put into words. It's something that I knew and I believed and I was very passionate about, but because I could never voice what it is that I thought about worship, it was difficult for me to actually do it and to believe it. Essentially, what it boils down to is there's theology, and which is the knowledge of who God is. And there's doxology, which is praise and worship to God. And theology should ultimately end up at doxology. Our knowledge of God points us and pushes us into worship of God. And if we have just the theology and not doxology along with it, we end up with orthodoxy, which is just knowing who God is. It's just knowledge. There's no joy there. And vice versa, if we want to just have doxology, if we just want to praise and worship, we end up with idolatry, because we're not doing it for God. We're doing it for ourselves because we want to just do it. It feels good, and we just want to praise. And these two things need to coincide with each other, and if they do, it creates a loop. Your knowledge of God prompts you to want to worship Him and just cry out in joy and praise God. And at the same time, your crying out in joy and praising God makes you want to know Him better and want to learn about Him, and it keeps going in a never-ending loop. And this is where my passion really is. I love music, and I love teaching. Thankfully, I've discovered these two things can be separate. I don't need to teach music, and when I do music, it doesn't need to be in a teaching setting. I can teach other things. I can teach about who God is, which now I'm finding is definitely a passion of mine. And I can also worship Him in music, in whatever I do. So the church has a long history of using folk tunes as worship songs. So they take the melody or the tune of a local folk song, put words to it, maybe a psalm, maybe a previous song that somebody has written, the words to that, a poem, and set it to this melody and in that the language of that people, and voila, you have a worship song. A couple examples of this: "All Glory Be to Christ" is amazing lyrics. The first verse or two are pretty much straight out of Ecclesiastes, not word for word, it's more paraphrased, and it's set to Auld Lang Syne, that song we all know and love on New Year's Eve. And another good example is "Be Still My Soul" by Jean Sibelius, a really popular classical tune called Finlandia is the actual title of that song. And it took words and set it to that tune, and we got "Be Still My Soul," a really awesome song about relying on God and finding your hope in God. And this is something perhaps that I can carry over into my ministry in Cambodia. What song are there local tunes that are really popular in Cambodia, and can we set those tunes to lyrics that preach the gospel? This is something that I am really looking forward to doing in my time in Cambodia. Are there local Cambodian tunes that can be set to lyrics that preach the gospel, so that locals know the song, they can focus just on the words? And the really good part about using tunes that everybody knows and rewriting lyrics is you already know the melody. You don't need to learn that. All you have to do is focus on the words, and in doing so you get to focus on the gospel message that they are preaching. And is this something that hopefully I can do in Cambodia, that can be done in Cambodia? And can we find local tunes, set them to gospel-centered lyrics, so that people can just pick them up, focus on the lyrics, and learn about God through the songs that they're worshiping God with? So here is where I find myself in this topic right now. I love music, all types around the world. I love listening to it. I love doing it. And I do love teaching it. And I love teaching specifically, or by itself, my goodness. And I love teaching both music and and the gospel. I've had a couple opportunities to do so, whether it's youth group or small group. And I love God. And those are three things that now don't necessarily need to be combined together, except for my love of God. That should go into everything I do. But my music passion and my passion for teaching don't have to go together. They can be separate, but they're now together in a different way. It's teaching people using music about the attributes of God in a gospel-centered worship. And we should be worshiping Him only Him in the light of the gospel, and encouraging everyone to write songs for themselves, and encouraging new church plants and churches around the world and here in the U.S. to find songs that are culturally appropriate, or write your own songs that are culturally appropriate, and write songs that preach the gospel, because that's what it's about. It's about knowing who God is and letting that feed our praise for God. Hopefully that's what I end up doing in Cambodia at some point, among other things. And I'll leave you with a quote by the great composer J.S. Bach. It sort of encapsulates my view of music and what it is to me. And the quote is this: "The aim and final end of all music should be none other than the glory of God and the refreshment of the soul." If it's not for those two things, then it's pointless. And with that, I'll leave you. Don't forget to visit my blog, nathanborntraeger.myadventures.org. And don't forget to donate there as well. There's a donate link on the left-hand side. If you click it, it brings up the page. Everything's all filled in, so you don't have to worry about figuring out how to enter me in there. It should all be in if you click that donate link from my blog. I'm pretty close actually to leaving. I'm about 63% funded at time of recording. Hopefully more by the time you listen. So visit my blog, read the other blogs that are posted on there, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. I have no idea what the next episode is going to be about. Maybe it'll be about how in the world am I going to pack my life into a couple of suitcases and take it to Cambodia. Hopefully that'll be the next one. We'll see. Without further ado, well, right now it's night. I was going to say good night. It might be day where you are. So we'll see you next time. And I think that's probably it. That's going to take a lot of editing. My goodness. Boy, it's a really good thing that I have a post to fix everything in here, because my goodness, I am screwing everything up. Nathan, you need to learn how to talk. Off the top of my head, Be Still My Soul, which is a Finnish tune written by, Jean Sibelius. Wow, Nathan. Things that you know because you took 4 classes on it. It should really be in your head by now. Another good example is Be Still My Soul, Finnish tune by, oh my gosh, Nathan. This podcast is actually supposed to go out a week and a half to 2 weeks ago. Unfortunately, I hit the wrong button and deleted everything. So it's taken me this long to get up the gumption to get back in it and do it again. And that was really horrible. And it corresponds... Wow, stupid YouTube notifications. Get out of here. Mute. Ugh. Take 500 million thousand. 24-minute recording. About 80 billion mistakes. My goodness. Good thing I have a day off on Tuesday, or this would be really horrible. It's going to take a while to edit. Alright. And end. Boy, if I have a blooper reel on the end, it's going to be about 80 billion minutes. It'll be way longer than the podcast itself.